I'm Barbara Gone-Mueller, and I welcome you to Chapter 4 of Prophet the Hatmaker's Son. This is the Peace Book Club, and I have had the honor of spending 17 married years with Robert Mueller, the life of Robert Mueller. We are going to now start exploring how Robert Mueller's life could impact all of us and allow us to have the kind of world we want. And Paul, it looks like when I go to speaker view, I see you. And do you see me, Paul? Okay, I see Lori. So maybe I'll go back to gallery view because it does seem to, if you make a sound, then it goes to you. So let's just stay with gallery view. Anyway, chapter 4 is about how Robert learned that education could open all these doors for him. Prior to chapter 4, if you've been reading Prophet, we were talking about how school just didn't mean anything to Robert. He did it because he had to, but he didn't get the passion for life and the passion that education can give you. So that's why we have our speakers today, Jerry and Des. And the reason they're here is because if you heard what she has done in her life to bring the full potential of a person to their biggest and possible future through her education practices. I'm going to start today by introducing our speakers because our program is going to be a little longer. We have a special video for you, and we have some wonderful ideas that we want to share with you. But in the meantime, I just want to thank all of you who have stayed with us for the last 3 chapters. You know, chapter 1, we talked with Douglas Roach, Ambassador Douglas Roach, who is on the call. And we talked about the powerful biography of Robert Mueller and how that can make a big difference in your life. In chapter 2, we had Ambassador Chaudry, and he talked about often as a child, Robert would look out of his window at the borders that he couldn't cross because war was going on between the Germans and the French. And they were cousins, eating the same food, having a meal, and then going home and shooting each other. And then chapter 3, the miracle of life with Yasmin Sheriff, UNICEF director. Now, you can hear all of these on peacepodcast.org if you want to go back and review any of the chapters that we've had before. But today we are doing chapter 4. It's a very special chapter. Everybody who's been reading it has been talking about it. And I want to introduce our speakers. First, I'd like you to meet Dr. Geraldine Schwartz. She's a very good friend of mine. The first time I met her, I was in Vancouver, or maybe it was in Santa Barbara at the Lacoste Invitational. But Jerry is amazing. Every time I talk to her, I get out, I do called a mind mapping. I mind map everything she says because everything she says is so powerful. And I think if everybody could just listen to Jerry, we'd all be much better off. This is her latest, one of her books. This book, I could hardly stop reading it to get on the podcast today, The Journey of Second Adulthood. I think as I look at this group of people here, I think there's a couple of us who are in our second adulthood. And what does that do? It inspires us. You know, you think about it, your second adulthood. This is the time when we take the wisdom that we have accumulated and the technology that we now have on Zoom and the books we've read and bring it to its full life. So I want to thank you, Jerry, for this book. And I want to thank you for your poem that you wrote. And there's just so much I would share with you. If you want a copy of the poem, put your name in the chat and I'll give it to you. All right, let's go over here to Jerry again. She's a strong voice for leadership, grounded in the right action. Oh, if all our leaders could only be grounded in the right action. Jerry is also the founder and president of the International Foundation of Learning and co-founder with her husband, Desmond, who you will get to meet in a minute, of the Visioneers. The Visioneers, a space that we all can go to and hear from hundreds of world leaders. And when you go there, you will see what I'm talking about. And then I want to introduce Desmond. Desmond is another amazing author. He has written the book, The Visioneers. If you haven't read this book, and look how thick it is, you're in for a couple of months of wonder. Wonder. What a wonderful word, because Des decided, as an educator, futurist, and author of The Visioneers, a courage story about belief in the future and several other titles that he has written. But the foundation for Desmond and for Jerry is the new Visioneers, the Visioneers. Think about what that means. Aren't we all Visioneers? But the future for the Visioneers was actually founded in this book, Des took, I don't even know how to tell you how many pages, but I'll just tell you how many pages he took. 509 pages to tell us about our future. But if you listen to Desmond today, you'll see why it's worth reading his book and why it's worth bringing together all of the work that they have done together. So without that, I'd like Desmond and Jerry to tell us a little about chapter 4 and then their special gift to us. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. It's a special pleasure to be on this call. And I want to start by thanking Douglas and Jasmine and Ambassador Chowdhury for setting the scene for what you're about to hear today. We will focus on chapter 4. And Des, I won't take much time at this moment, but Des will set the scene and then we'll take off in another direction. So listen with your heart and with both ears to this, because in the end, we're going to come to a place where we're going to offer not only gift, but some actual action on waging peace. And I'll tell you what that is when I get my turn. Here you go, Desmond.
I just want to make sure the screen sharing is on.
It is.
Paul, because Paul will be sharing some slides.
It's not on yet.
Okay, Paul, I'm on share.
It needs to say multiple participants are allowed to share.
Wonder why all that's coming up. Tell me, Paul, what I should click because I thought I was already there.
There's an option that says multiple participants may share.
Okay, let's close that down. We should have practiced this prior to this wonderful program. We would have made this multiple participants can share simultaneously. Does that work for you, Paul?
That's the one that we
Paul
want.
is
Yeah.
the backbone for so much of the work that Jerry and Des do, and I thank you, Paul.
Okay, are we ready to go? Paul, you
We're
can put up
ready. And Joni is on. I see Joni. Go ahead.
Chapter 4 of the prophet, the Hatmaker's Son, is a touching account of the experience of a sensitive young boy of 14 to 15 years of age caught up in the machinations of war. In brilliant, understated description and selected commentary from the young Robert, Douglas Gillies presents us with the disturbing consequences of war on the human psyche. 14-year-old Robert had just found a brilliant teacher who wasn't really a teacher at all. He was a librarian, and a German one to boot, which was making Robert's mother, who herself had been damaged from the experiences of the First World War, she was suspicious and critical of this German librarian. Robert was introduced to the ideas of 18th century Enlightenment German philosophers, Schiller and Goethe, from whom he learned about passion, enthusiasm, a love for life, and the role of the arts in creating meaningful engagements with life. He began to thrive as a student, but then he was uprooted as the family was forced to evacuate from their dangerous location on the border of France and Germany, once war broke out between the two countries. His father was called up to fight for France, and his mother ruled with a stern, unsympathetic hand as she struggled to do what she thought was best for the family. Sensitive young Robert was caught up in the middle and learned early to have a bitter hatred of war and the leaders like Adolf Hitler who unleashed it. We can see a strong parallel today with what must be happening to sensitive young minds in Ukraine who are suffering through the disruptions and cruelty of a war being waged by Russian President Vladimir Putin against a peaceful neighbor. 80 years apart in time doesn't make the horror of war any less devastating, and is surely a bitter irony for Robert's legacy when he worked so hard all his life to be a peace builder and a global citizen. I can also see a parallel between my own life and Robert's, though we were born far apart in distance and significantly different in time. At the outbreak of World War II, I had just been born many thousands of miles away from the conflict in Europe. I was born in Australia. And Robert was 15 years old, and he was right at the edge of the fighting. He grew up and joined the United Nations after the war and decided that his life must be his expression of his love for humanity and the earth. Without any direct exposure to war, I grew up to become an educator, then a government official in Canada with some responsibility for representing Canada in international conferences at UNESCO. I eventually came to express my love for humanity, not so much through my life, as Robert did, but through the art of literature. This in itself provides another connection between myself and Robert. One of the German philosophers who influenced Robert's thinking was Friedrich Schiller, whose famous dictum was, "Life imitates art." Doug Gillies includes a direct quote from Schiller in chapter 4 of Prophet. And here's the quote. "Art is an expression of values. Life imitates art because art is a voice preparing the shape of things to come." In the early 1990s, I had just passed my 50th birthday when I wrote The Visioneers, a courage story about belief in the future. And in this book, I was very deliberately seeking to create a future scenario for the world of the vision expressed by Robert. And here's his vision. "I will help this planet with all my abilities and love to become what it was always meant to be, the planet of God, inhabited by a happy, fulfilled, peaceful, loving humanity, thankful for the miraculous gift of life." Those are Robert's words and his vision of what the world should and could be. Robert and I didn't know each other in 1992 when The Visioneers was published, but it's little wonder that when he read the book a few years later, he became a great supporter. No wonder, because the book is filled with the sentiments expressed over and over by Robert through his life and his work. It's as if Robert was waiting for the book to come along. Let me share some of the quotations from the book, and you'll see what I mean. We have the next slide, yes. Here's a comment about what I call the we future. "We see people everywhere throughout the world sitting down, talking about what they would like to see for the world. We talk about a we future, which means cooperation, participation, sharing, seeing things as a whole, acting together." Next slide. "Human minds are interconnected in mysterious ways we don't understand. Millions of people affirming a positive vision is the most powerful force on earth." One more. "I see people coming together, laughing, joyfully planning the well-being of people everywhere. I see peace, joy, love, happiness, honor, dignity, and friendship all of these, all the things people talk about and work for. I was putting these words into the mouths of my characters in the book. And it fell to me in life to create this piece of art as literature that would support everything that Robert believed in and worked for. Friedrich Schiller said that life imitates art. But in 1992, there was a piece missing in order for that to be the case for the Visioneers. The technology for linking the world together had not been invented. I've had to wait 30 years for that to happen. But now in 2022, we're on the cusp of life imitating the art of my book. Under Jerry's leadership, we've worked tirelessly for the last 5 years to turn the fictitious story of the Visioneers into reality. And in 3 months from now, in October, we're going to launch the Visioneers project into the wider world. And at the launch, we will honor Robert as one of our Visioneers' heroes of humanity. And with Barbara's help, we will be adding his voice to our presentations. And we're sure he would be an enthusiastic participant if he were here. And we have no doubt that he's adding his support in spirit in whatever ways he can. So I feel strongly moved to be speaking today about Robert and the intersection of our two separate but connected lives. And in whatever years I have remaining, if I can be an instrument to help realize Robert's vision for the world, I can think of no greater honor or worthwhile pursuit. So I'll stop there and hand it back to Jerry, who will talk more about what I've been referring to.
Thank you, Desmond. So I will set this scene in a different way. Some of you may know that I'm a psychologist and a neuroscientist. And one of the things that means is that I look for root causes in order to get a remedy to the problems around. So I would like to share just a few things about the psychology of what we are about to do. Des pointed to the facts that Robert's parents grew up in the shadow of World War I and brought that angst and that distress into the raising of this very sensitive young boy. But Robert, too, in the lead up to the war and in the war itself and the follow through, was very, very emotionally distressed by war. And it's very important to understand that the human brain that sends its messages and signals into every corner of our body is enormously affected by distress. And this results in behavior that is distressed and fear-based. So PTSD isn't only the soldier's problem, it's all the problem that is being faced. So Douglas tells us about chapter 4, about the lead up to the war, about the appeasement, about Czechoslovakia, the marches into Poland, and all those things together. And you can imagine the distress in which Robert was living. Now, here's the thing. Many people behave very poorly under distress, and crime goes up, violence goes up, all the despair and the negative things goes up. And this is a worldwide phenomenon that we're just beginning to understand that affects everything. It affects politics, it affects the media, and it affects each of us. It invades our hearts, whether we like it or not. All the more remarkable that a person like Robert takes the position of working in a positive, enthusiastic, determined way against all this, and this is the pledge of his life. So, Paul, would you put up the slide? It used to be one. Okay. I want everybody to think about that in terms of Robert and Tom, in terms of their own lives. Robert didn't see himself as an artist. He said he had to express himself through his own life, through his thoughts, feelings, and in his dreams and ideas, and in my love for humanity and all the earth. And so we all know that his whole life he spent influencing, supporting, mentoring people to express this positivity and this enthusiasm for peace in their own life. And what that does on a big macro field is really important in terms of what the solution is to all the problems of our time. The solution to distress is eustress, the opposite of stress, a positive way of filling the body in every corner with adrenaline and with energy. And Robert was the absolute epitome of that. His life expressed his art. Two things should happen from this. First of all, I want you to think about your own life as you watch what we're going to show you about Robert. Because what we're going to show you occurred after his life at the United Nations. And what you're about to see is a documentary that was made in April of 1997, when the Earth still had 1,000 days, produced by Desmond and what we call our Knowledge Network here in Vancouver, that captures the spirit of what Robert was doing when he was talking to the children. So Robert spent his life talking to prime ministers and presidents and important people all over the world, and some of you as well. But in this particular moment, we had gathered from all over the province teams of children, their teachers and their parents, in order to create a different environment for action in their generation. And so, so you're going to be watching Robert expressing his life as art. And when we're done, we need to talk about what lessons this gives us and how we can have a macro solution to what is going on in the distress in the world today. So from here, and just a reference to his pledge to spend his life working for peace, could you put on the video?
One second.
These are excerpts of them, and we will provide the whole video for you at a later time if you want to watch it.
It begins with an introduction from Jerry and me when we were a bit younger.
2018 is the introduction.
From time to time, one makes important discoveries from the past. Early in 2018, while looking through some obscure papers in the basement of our home in Vancouver, Canada, we came across an old VHS tape of a conference we hosted in Vancouver in April 1997. It was called Global Citizenship 2000 and was intended to be a preparation for teams of young people for the coming third millennium. When we played the tape on an old VHS machine that we still have, we discovered the extraordinary documentary you are about to watch. We knew right away that we had found something rare, unique, very special, and very important. Here was Dr. Robert Mueller, a world-class elder who derived his insights from 40 years at the United Nations, many of them in the top ranks of the organization, as Assistant Secretary General to 4 Secretaries General. As such, He was head of the organization and founder of many of its special agencies, such as the World Health Organization. Here in this video, he was speaking not to heads of state or ambassadors from scores of countries, but to the children, to the youth of the next generation. We could see that although his message was 20 years old, it was meant for today. What you are about to see is a once-lost treasure. It features the wisdom of one of the world's greatest citizens of the 20th century, Dr. Robert Mueller, who spent the last years of his extraordinary life of service to humanity as Chancellor of the United Nations University for Peace in Costa Rica, where, among other things, he was writing 2,000 ideas for the year 2000. He didn't stop there. Indeed, he wrote down more than 4,000 creative ideas for the improvement of the world in the third millennium.
As a special guest of our non-profit organization, the International Foundation of Learning, Dr. Mueller came to Vancouver in April 1997 at the age of 75 to speak to the Global Citizenship 2000 conference. The participants were teams of young people and their teachers and parents from schools, and a team of student teachers from Simon Fraser University. In addition, leaders and performers from a diverse multicultural community added to the richness of the program. They had come together to learn about prospects for the future and to discuss how they could contribute to improving the world in the coming new millennium, then only 1,000 days.
It was good that on the eve of the 1,000th day in Vancouver, Canada, some of us remembered the Earth. We came together in Congress, a youth Congress, because our youth must rediscover what adults of the industrial world have forgotten. To lead the learning, we invited an Elder Earth spokesman, Dr. Robert Mueller, Chancellor of the United Nations University for Peace. He mingled freely with the young people. Through his poetry, he asked them to decide to be global citizens.
This was never to underestimate the power of dreams.
I had a dream of a worldwide celebration of the year 2000, and this dream now is becoming true. To you young people, I would like to give you 3 of my advices from my own life. The first one is to have a vision, like Desmond and Jerry. In Costa Rica, in my little farmhouse, I have a bench of visions, which was inspired by them. And in the morning, I go to this bench of visions to look at the sunrise, beautiful sunrise, and to have the vision of a world where there will be peace.
We are searching for new wisdom on how to act and how to be on our planet. On April 6, 1997, the world had 1,000 days in which to learn some new wisdom. This was the teaching that Robert Mueller brought to the young people at our Youth Congress. How to become a new generation of global citizens, of Earth citizens, whose primary concern is to care for the Earth and all life on it.
When I came to the United Nations in Lake Success and Old War Factory, the main preoccupation of humanity after this horrible World War II was how can we improve human lives? So that the Charter of the United Nations was created to put an end to war, and everything I was working on in the United Nations until about 1970, from 45 to 70, you can imagine, was how to improve human life on this planet. And then in about 1970, everything began to change. This period of human concerns was suddenly replaced by a new concern. And it was the Swedish government, which was the most industrialized country on earth, that came to the United Nations. First he went to UNESCO to have a world conference on the biosphere. And the Swedes said to the conference, something is getting wrong on this planet. We have now acid rain on our trees, and we have polluted lakes and rivers. And we want to warn the rest of the world that something is getting wrong. So the Swedes were happy and then decided to have a world conference on the environment in 1972. And this was a very important change in human history. At that time, there was not a single government on earth that was talking about the environment. There was no Ministry of the Environment. And since this conference in Sweden, the whole world was made aware that something was being destroyed in our environment. So since 1970, and this was a fundamental change I saw in my life, from humanism suddenly to also take care of not damaging what was around us. That was the second period. And then in 1980 came a third one. I was bombarded by letters from a new profession called climatologists. Before that you had only weather prediction meteorology. And they wrote to the UN, the climate of this world is going to pieces. The atmosphere is getting warmer. We are going to have even changes in the basic ocean currents by the year 2020 if we continue to produce the heat here all around this planet. So that we looked into this. We had meetings with the scientists and we came to the conclusion that indeed that was very serious. The atmosphere was getting warmer, that you had a greenhouse effect, and that we had to have a world conference on climate. And now, for all practical purposes, it is the Earth which is number one. And we humans are being reminded of what the indigenous people always told us. I have here a quotation from Chief Seattle. Teach your children what we have taught our children, that the earth is our mother. Whatever befalls the earth befalls the children of the earth. This we know, the earth does not belong to us. We belong to the earth. And in my 2,000 ideas, I have about 50 of them where I put myself in the place of the earth. I have a dialogue with the earth. And the earth then says to me, what are you doing to me? For example, you have multiplied the number of beings on this planet from 2.5 billion people in 1952 to 5.6 billion today. And that was written at the end of 94, and today we are 5.8 billion people. How could you do this to me? To have all this big population explosion all around the world, and I, the earth, I'm supposed to feed them? Why did you do this to me? And then I say to the earth, you know, it was not our fault, it was a mistake. Because we did not know that when we helped the poor countries to save their children, we didn't tell the parents that they didn't need 6 children to have 2 left at the end of their lives to till the land and to take care of them. So we saved the children and they continued to have 6 children. Until we discovered this in the United Nations, and by that time it was too late.
Change.
The media is probably one of the most important influences we have on saving this planet. And here I am, a local citizen, wondering, what can I do to get the media to tell me the truth? The answer is write letters to the editor, call up the media, they're real people. As soon as you find somebody writing the kind of article that you want, call them and thank them, because they act like they've never been thanked before and they'll do more of the same. But we have something called the World Core Curriculum for the media, and that means that if the media will only take care of each of the planetary problems in one article per year, we'll get the right education to the public.
There is a new word to describe people who go out and create a better future. We call them visioneers.
A visioneer is someone who looks forward into the future in a creative way from the perspective of saying, this is what I can see about the way the world should be, the way I would like the world to be, the kind of future that I would like to live in. And then takes the next step, which is the step of acting to bring that vision about. And this I regard as a strategic kind of thinking, because you have to take deliberate action to create the future that you want to have. And so I like to think about visioneers as being pioneers of the future. Pioneers from history are those who come to a new frontier and create a new civilization. Well, we have to create a new kind of future, because what we're clearly seeing is that the kind of future that's coming towards us is not the kind of future that we want to live in. And if we're going to be able to change that, we have to see it first, because if you can't see it, you can't do it. So a visioneer is someone who looks forward in their own mind and then goes and acts to make that future happen. And my big dream about how this can become a reality on the planet, of course, is that people everywhere, children in schools, scientists, teachers, educated people, not so well educated people, everyone engages in this very human, natural process of looking forward positively and creatively to make the world a cooperative, sustainable place where all of us can live.
It takes...
So I'm going to have another dream, namely to play the Ode to Joy here in this beautiful library, and that's what you're going to hear. I'm sorry not to have such beautiful performances as you had before, but on those 10 little holes I will try my best. Okay.
So I
have to take a moment to recover from that.
To recover from that. I don't know about you, but it always brings tears to my eyes to see what Robert has done. And so here's the thing. I'd like to share with you how we translate Robert's wisdom, his positive solutions, to a macro solution for the world now. And I'd like to invite you to participate in it in a very positive and practical way. Before I do that, you have heard Robert play the Ode to Joy. You have heard his 3 advices. You have heard what he says to the children. He's talking from his authentic heart in front of us, in spite of the stitching together. Please, anybody who would like to comment on that before we proceed, let's go now. I'm speechless.
We're all speechless because of that playing of the Ode to Joy. when you hear that and you see Robert's passion for life, it came through in that video. He had such a passion that it would be contagious and people would understand that when you believe in something, you have to bring it to its potential with your enthusiasm, as you two have done with the Visioneers. And so I thank you for showing us the video of Robert and his glory. It brought tears to my eyes too, because he cared so much for our planet. He cared so much that he never wanted to die because he felt he was important to make this future possible. And I kept saying, Robert, yes, you are important, but you have a lot of apostles out there. Look at all the people you have already given your wisdom to. And with that, I'm going to turn to David Wick because he also knew Robert. And David?
It was actually a bit breathtaking to see this video of Robert and his playing his harmonica, just like, oh, so beautiful. But bringing that to life, his deep wisdom is not just his enthusiasm, but it's a deep wisdom of knowing of the truth. And the truth is, speaking this, it is eternal. The ups and downs in the physical world, and I experience that now, but the truth of the love, of the humanity, of the care, it is eternal. And Robert knew that, and he focused in on that, and he wrote about that, and he held that, and he lived that. In 1995, 2 years prior to that, Robert was at Joni. Joni was there. Joni was the co-creator of that. You there, Joni? And it was the Children's Peace Festival.
Children's World Peace Festival.
World Peace Festival. Tell us about it, because we were there. Pathways to Peace created this, and with Robert was there, and with children. It was all about the children. But Robert was there in his fullness, and he played the Ode to Joy to My Son as we were standing there. But Joni, just your reflections on Robert as he speaks to children.
He was so inspiring. I mean, it's hard to add anything because you've seen how inspiring he was. And he was a dear, dear friend to peace building, to the whole movement. 1995 was an extraordinary celebration of the 50th anniversary of the United Nations. And he was a key player in that, not only at the Children's World Peace Festival, but also at a couple of conferences in San Francisco, which honored the 50th and the United Nations. And I got to drive him and Barbara around San Francisco. And he was, what can I say? He personified peace in everything he did and everything he stood for. And he was we called him the patron saint of Pathways to Peace.
Right.
And he was very honored to be part of Pathways to Peace because it allowed him to have a vehicle for the peace that he wanted to see on the planet. And he knew when he was there that it was contagious, that peace became something everybody wanted. David and Joni and Avon and so many others who felt that peace is possible. But Robert had that name from the United Nations. That allowed them to have a little more credibility. He shared that name with anybody who invited him to speak. He would probably do 300 speeches a year. Now, there's only 365 days in a calendar year. And he was out speaking sometimes 2-3 times. I traveled with him to India. He didn't make one speech. He didn't make 2 speeches. He made 3 speeches in that time. And then people could get that passion that he had, that wisdom, that vibration, that peace is possible. Right, David? And so with all of that, we carry that DNA because we've been influenced by him. And when I met him in 94, I said, well, who is this guy? And his vibration, again, that enthusiasm for peace was so contagious that it brought me to him. And I'm looking at one of my dear friends, Diane, on this call. And Diane met Robert when she was 12 years old because her aunt gave her an article that Robert wrote at the United Nations. People began to know Robert from his work, from his words. And you remember Maya Angelou said, it's your words that bring meaning. It's your voice that brings meaning to the written words. And then later, years later, Diane gets to travel with Robert to Peru. She sits next to him on the train that's going up to Machu Picchu. And Diane and I become close friends. We are still friends today. I don't know how many hundreds of years later, but if you look at her, you'll see she hasn't aged a bit. It's because we carry peace in us. And it brings all of us that youthful glow, the glow of peace. Think about that. I've always said the reason I don't look like I'm as old as I am is because I have a peace glow. And a peace glow just comes out of us, and and it's in our enthusiasm. So, David, I see you smiling. Would you like to add a few more words?
Well, it's just so important to open that. I'll speak for myself. So important to open that space. Robert is a reminder, and lives and still lives in seeing that. But to not get discouraged and to yes, tough times, and continue and recharge in that space. And I thank you, Jerry and Desmond, for bringing this forward and for your work all these years. And I look forward to learning what happens in October with the Visioneers. But that's it. It's a dedication. It's a continuation. But it's the uplifting of our own spirit that we can reach out to others. Thank you so much, Bob.
Thank you, David. And Lori Marshall, I see your hand is up. Just talk, Lori. We're ready to hear you, dear.
I'm so inspired and filled with hope meeting Robert, even though he's not here. And I just read Dare to Lead by Brene Brown, and she talks about that joy is it's a feeling of vulnerability, and that joy is needed to build the strength to face tragedy. And when I heard Ode to Joy be played, and I think about this enthusiasm for peace and the possibility of peace, it just feels so very important, because we often rehearse worst case scenarios to prepare for tragedy, but really what we need is more joy. And the arts have so much joy to give, as do children.
Lori, I really thank you for that. I read somewhere that when we die, God's going to say, how much joy did you experience? So if you want to go to heaven, you better start experiencing your joy. All right, with that, it gives me great joy to introduce Solace Sweet, my dear friend from Oregon. Solace?
Actually, I'm from Seattle, but it's close.
Sorry, Seattle, Washington. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I don't mind being in Oregon. My question is that there's been a lot of talk about Robert making presentations to young people. And that was 30 or 40 years ago, maybe 30 years ago. Are there examples of people in those groups and how they brought forward what he was giving them?
Barbara, can I talk?
Please, Jerry, please.
Answer that question. Sala, I have a whole story for you that I'm going to share not only with you, but with everyone to answer that question very profoundly, because that is probably the most important question in this whole process, and the whole reason that we brought you this video. So how about, Barbara, if I put that answer to everyone, and then anyone who else wants to talk then keeps that in mind and talks about that. Would that work?
Are you going to talk about it now, Jerry? Just say what it was. Yeah.
I would like to talk
Please,
about it now, and then give the people whose hands are still up chance after I do.
Okay.
Is that fair?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So I'd like to go into the whole purpose for why we brought you Robert live in this moment, is because we believe that action is urgently required in order to get an outcome beyond the talking, beyond the inspiration, because the world is in great need for putting Robert's for putting Robert's words and his ideas into action. So, with the video that you saw is an example, and we're going to put not only this short version of it where you saw just pieces of it, but the whole documentary is on our Masterworks Emporium, and we will give you access to it both in this email that I was talking about and in the chat.
Paul, can you put that up in the chat for everyone?
Okay, so you will see the answer in the actual video itself, but what you will see is the children who went away and responded, and then gave their ideas of what they were going to do. But at that time, we had no way of knowing what, in fact, anybody was going to do. The technology to follow through was not available. But now the technology is available, and we need to take advantage of that technology in a powerful way. So I said to you when I first introduced Robert, his words that his life was that he was going to express his art in his life. And all of you experienced one way or other the incredible action, and so did the world, because he helped to found these wonderful organizations. He mentored so many people. But what actually happened, we don't really know. And there is such an angst out there, such a despair that we're going down the hill really fast and nobody can do anything about it. It's too big, it's too complex. And yet the science is telling us that it's really simple. The science is telling us that we have to change the internal environment of hundreds of thousands of people to make a difference in the behavior that is going to link to the United Nations, again, 17 Sustainable Development Goals. That if we start reducing hunger, we reduce stress. If we educate people to understand peace, we give them hope. We inspire them. Each of these goals is critically important to create a whole new way of consciousness in humanity. And it has to be hundreds of thousands of people. How can you do that? Well, now the Visioneers is a new kind of technology, and we're going to introduce it as such in our launch of the event on October the 9th. It's a technology that is using science to demonstrate, to provide observable evidence of how we are a noble species, doing incredible amounts of good work. You heard Robert, for example, saying that in 1970, there wasn't a single Ministry of the Environment. And now every nation in the world is got a Ministry of the Environment. And if you look at what they're doing, they may not be doing enough to affect the temperature yet, but everybody is doing it. There's incredible work on new sources of energy all over the world. But even more important, we need to address this distress that has come from the angst that has come out of the world wars in last century and what is going on in this century. How do we do that? Well, about a year ago, we began to create the Visioneers International Network project. We had 40 leaders, including Robert and Barbara, in 3 countries. A year later, already, we have more than 350 incredible leaders like Robert, in 21 countries and moving forward. So what we are going to do, and we have put the good work, the stories in the form of art and music and song into a wall of stories, because that's how we affect people. Desmond's book, The Visioneers, is a storybook. It's a novel. It's a page turner. You wouldn't be able to put it down. And when you hear the stories that are on the Visioneers wall of stories in our virtual People's Exposition, you'll be absolutely brought to tears of joy to know what in fact is happening. I'm just going to tell you one little story of the 350, just to give you a sense of it. Okay? A young man who was a person with learning disabilities who we repaired at our Vancouver Learning Center, graduated with honors from high school and earned 2 university degrees and was about to start his PhD when he went on a walkabout around the world, like young people like to do in his gap year. And he found himself in a small village in Uganda. And he walked around and he saw that the children were not going to school. And curious kind of guy, found out why, that every child 5 years old and on had a job. And they took a pail and for 2 hours, they walked to a source of clean water, filled their pail, and trying not to spill a drop, walked back for another 2 hours. And so they had no time for school. So he found a way to get wells to be dug in that village, but that was not enough. He was a techie kind of guy, and he got old shipping containers that nobody was using, and he dragged them into the village and cut windows and doors, and brought old computers that nobody wanted, and came back to Vancouver and created an app where he had young people reading children's stories into this app. And every time they spoke a word, it lit up on the screen, and he found a way to teach children to read. So last year, as part of the United Nations initiative in the refugee camp in Uganda, they taught 35,000 children to read. And they have created this light box, which is going all over the world. They're in India and Pakistan now, and they'll be teaching hundreds of thousands of children to read, giving them the gift of literacy. Can you imagine how that goes forward? He came back to us at the Learning Center. He said, "You taught me to read. Now I'm teaching children to read." This is a young man of 23 years old. That's one of the incredible stories that are on our wall of stories. And
thank you, Jerry. I'm going to move to Joanne, and then we'll come back to you. Joanne, please.
Yes, I'm thinking of, Barbara, the message that you had and that you gave as part of that. And yes, tears were in my eyes. Folks, 60 countries just met in Vienna to dismantle nuclear weapons. Did anybody do anything about that? It is such of a joyous event that just occurred because ICAN, the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, ran this session. And we're going to be meeting in New York on nuclear proliferation. You know, Robert is a very strong supporter that disarmament is very good for the environment, but nobody is talking about that. We are still spending more money, and we need to act. So if everybody here, we just had a session with our congressperson, and the next time, and she was very pro-military, and we just got a message that she voted against the increase in the military. It works because we had enough people that let her know that we cared. So please put this on the agenda and act now, because we really need it.
Well, Joanne, I'm going to nominate you for an award on the Visioneers Network, and you will have your story on within a week if you tell it to us. And
this is a woman who has been a close friend to Robert when he was at the United Nations. And so that's a wonderful idea, Jerry. But I'm going to add one more story. When we were at the 50th anniversary, as you heard, Joni drove us around. We were very much in love, and we were always together and holding hands and showing others what loving embraces look like, because we were always hugging. But what happened was this woman came up to us at the 50th anniversary and she said, "Robert, I was at your speech. I heard you play the harmonica, and I decided I was going to do what you said. I was going to work for peace." And I thought, oh, brother, here it comes. And she said, "I sold my house and I moved to Africa without anything except the money from the house. And guess what I did? I realized they had a need for the people who were disabled, that they couldn't get around without part of their family moving them around, or they had sticks because they were blind, or a person needing them. I made equipment that would allow people to get these people who were disabled or not able to do the things that needed to be done. And now I am a millionaire, and I never expected it. All I wanted to do was help people. And so when Robert looked at her, she said, "Thank you, Robert, because without your words, without your harmonica, I never would have done this. I never would have had the courage to do what I know God wanted me to do." And that was at the 50th anniversary. From that day forward, I never cared who came up to tell us what happened. Not one person who had heard Robert and all the stories that I had in these 17 years of marriage and my years before did I hear a story that had a negative ending. When you work from your passion, from your point of view, from what you can do, your endings to your stories are glorious. Let me tell you, even though you're going to have your ups and your downs, right, Dee Boswell? You're going to have your ups and your downs, but you're in the right place at the right time. That's what Joyce, on her beautiful Gratitude Mojo book, teaches us. You're in the right place at the right time with gratitude. Now, I'm going to tell you a personal story. Recently, our garage door didn't open. It just wouldn't do it. So I said, okay, I'm going to open it myself. Well, and then I had this vision. I was going to get my finger caught in the sliding glass garage door. Sure enough, this is the proof. But when that happened, I was in gratitude. My gratitude was it was my left hand, not my right hand. So I'm sitting there with my finger stuck in the automatic garage door saying, "Thank you, God, it's my left hand." And then I say, "Help." And I think, who's going to help me? I'm all by myself. But I had been exercising. So I lifted up the garage door with my super strength and went in the house, put it in ice water. And nobody can believe this happened a week ago. It's so healing so quickly. The point is, I was in gratitude rather than, "Oh, Lord, look at me. Why did you let this happen to me?" And so that's what Robert always taught me. This too shall pass, he would say. This too is going to become a reason for you to get up in the morning. This too is a lesson to be learned. I feel sometimes that what he would tell me in this little humble cabin in Costa Rica, when the squirrels were jumping on me or the mice were running around my feet, "This too shall pass, Barbara, and we shall have peace on the planet." Because the prophecy from Mount Rasur was, from this hill, peace will go to the entire world. From this humble little cabin. Jerry and Des, you were there. You saw that. Joni, you were there. Joni fell in love. That's a humble little cabin. I remember telling her, "This guy in your elder hostel group is loving you." She said, "Oh, he loves all the women." I said, "No, he loves you." Do you know what happened? A year later, they got married. Pay attention. If you're noticing things, tell people what you're noticing. They may not be as alert as you are. And that's what Robert was. He was always alert. He may have played his harmonica and may have made a speech, but when somebody came up to him, he was all there for them. Whoever came into his path, he was there for them. And they learned that when you pay attention, miracles happen. And so Jerry and Des, we're about out of time, but I would like you to finish up with a little bit more, and then we'll be thanking everybody and telling you about the exciting news of our next speaker, next chapter 5. You're not going to believe it. Okay, Jerry and Des.
Okay, so I want to very, very quickly tell you that we would like to invite each of you to participate in the virtual live stream of the launch on October the 9th. At 11 o'clock in the morning Pacific time, because you will hear the most extraordinary things. And we will put the ability to do that in the chat if you would, Paul. But I would like to just finish my concept of saying that there is science behind what Barbara was just saying, that if we can affect the macro hundreds of thousands of minds with the follow through to Robert's wisdom and the follow through to the fact that there is huge goodness in the world, and we put this together on a platform that the media can use in thousands and thousands of stories of good work that are, as Joanne said, lost and not available. If we can do this, And if we act together to do this, this will produce a very different outcome for Robert's legacy than just talking about it. And so it's really, really important to make the kind of pledge that you have all been acting with anyway in your life, to make a difference in peace. And we are going to offer the opportunity of creating visioneer leadership circles all over the world with groups of 3 or more who can feed their stories into our wall of stories and bring these thousands of people together. So we will have the opportunity in October to be broadcast to networks with tens of thousands of viewers. And it could be even more than that. And that given the kind of lifetimes you've had, I would really ask that you consider participation in this event. All you have to do is to state your intention and pre-register for this event. And here's the gift that will come when you do this. First of all, we will have a follow-through episodes of 10 extraordinary minds and stories like Robert that will follow 2 weeks apart to all the people who pre-register and will come right into their home, into their living room. We suggest that you don't watch it by yourself, but that you invite your family and your friends to participate with you, because every mind you bring into this place is another way to get this macro effect. And what we're doing in the science part of it is we are hooking these stories to the 17 Sustainable Goals of the United Nations and creating a progress chart by giving each one of them points in each of these 17 ways to show the actual on-the-ground observable evidence of the kind of species we are. So what I'm saying here is join us, come and watch the launch, create a little leadership circle of your own. It's not a huge amount of work, but it will, each one of these circles will add to this macro effect. We're going to make it easy. We'll do all the work. We'll create the platform. And what we will offer to each of these circles is a package which will include the launch and these 10 incredible, basically episodes from people like Jane Goodall, Jean Houston, Irvin Laszlo, who founded the Club of Buddha.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there. You gave away my secret. Irvin Laszlo is our one who's going to do chapter 5 next month. Now, if you have any friends who do not know Irvin Laszlo, Google his name, go on Amazon. This man created so many books. And I said to him, I'm a Hungarian. Irvin Laszlo is Hungarian. He created the Club of Budapest, which I am privileged to be a member of. My late husband, Robert, was a member of the Club of Budapest. And do you know what Irvin would do when he was going to write a book? I said, Irvin, how could you write so many books? He said, I sit down with the clean space in front of me. I take clean paper and I take a pencil and I begin to write. And do you know my wife feeds me? They don't bother me much, but she feeds me. I just have to keep writing because it just comes to me. I write and I write and I write. Then I edit and then I write some more. This is Irvin Laszlo, a very, very close friend to Robert Mueller. He was there at the United Nations with him. He's a concert pianist turned, as he said on his Irvin Laszlo bio under Amazon, Hungarian philosopher of science, systems analyst, started as a classical pianist. He's an advocate for quantum. This is what Jerry's talking about, quantum consciousness, quantum cosmic consciousness. Think about those words, quantum cosmic consciousness. You can change the world. That's one of his books. You, me, Asala, Joni, all of us can change the world. And then he brings you the wisdom principle. Those are just 2 of his books. Now I'll ask you to take your little cursor and go down to the end of the chat. At the end of the chat, there's 3 buttons, 3 little dots. click on that 3 dots and write the word underneath that save chat. You must save this chat today, and you must print it out. That allows you to know what Jerry and Des have so kindly offered free to you to go to their symposium. You must click this all out. Now, even Sandy said I should have a new radio show called Planet Earth and let my enthusiasm spread through the radio waves. I'm a Zoomer, so I'll probably let my enthusiasm spread through the Zoomer way. Now, so click on the 3 dots, and underneath it says Save Chat. Save Chat. When you click down and you end the meeting today, the chat will come up, print it out, and keep it and underline it, read it. You know, so often we finish these meetings and we go about our lives. What are you supposed to do now that you've heard Jerry and Des? You're supposed to sit a few minutes, just think, what was their message? What does it mean to me today? What can I do? What can Lori do? Is she going to create a new singing tree? You know, each of us, Sala, she's working on these fabulous programs. Each of us have something that we can contribute to this world to make it a better place. Now, who's going to be our speaker next August the 7th? Ervin Laszlo from Italy. That's the value of Zoom. And if you haven't known about Ervin Laszlo, he's now one of the people that Jerry wrote about in her book. He's an elder. He's 90 years young. In Jerry's poem, she writes at the end here, the stakes are higher now. The time is shorter. Strive higher. Engage deeply. Champion right causes. Proceed with fearless courage that elder age allows. Proceed with fearless courage that elder age allows. Some of you have written in the chat that you would like me to send you this poem, and I'm going to ask Jerry if she has a copy that I can send out, or I'll just make a copy of this and type it again and send it to you. It is so amazing. Now, a lot of the people on my interviews on my peacepodcast.org are 104 years young. Who is that? He started the International Court, the Criminal Court. Ben Ferenz, when he was 26, said to the lawyers, I'll do it. They had 300 criminals from the Nazi era, and they only had 30 chairs. And those 30 chairs were going to be filled with the worst of the worst. Now, how did he find them? A miracle. Remember that your life is made for miracles. Get out of the way of your worries and your troubles and think of the miracles that are going to find you. He did not know which one of these 300 criminals to put in those 30 chairs. The miracle. Listen to the miracle. And if you haven't heard peacepodcast.org, go there and listen to Ben Ferenz. What does he say? Somebody found the diaries of these 300 guys who wrote down the time they did the shooting, the towns they were in. He, at 26, went through these diaries and he picked the 30 worst criminals. And when they said to each of these, were you at this location at this time? And did you shoot an entire village? Not guilty. And he would say, I have it in your handwriting. You were there, and this is what you did. And you are going to get one of those 30 chairs that we are going to now make war criminals responsible for their behavior. We all have that in us to do the right thing, as we started off our podcast today, to do the right thing at the right moment. These are words of wisdom that Robert wants us to remember. So with that, I am so delighted. Joni C. just wrote, Ben Ferenz was a wonderful mentor of the Action Coalition for Global Change. And he was at the United Nations. You know, I am so lucky that I know so many great people. And each of you are right there with me. Joni Carley, as soon as I got off the talking to Joyce this morning, I called up Joni Carley. Joni Carley wrote a fantastic book, and I think it's right here. Just a minute. I never put things too far away from me. Well, I guess I did. This is too far away. Anyway, when Joni wrote that book, it's about leadership, the silent role of leadership today. And she had this, one of her chapters was about mojo. mojo, that spark of life that leaders carry around with them. Robert was a mojo king, if you ask me. He knew that he could take that mojo that he had, that enthusiasm for peace, and bring it to everybody. So when Joyce was writing her gratitude journal, I said, Joyce, you can't call it gratitude whatever. Call it gratitude mojo. If you don't know anything about gratitude, order Joyce Wyckoff's Gratitude Mojo, because it is the most amazing book. Before I started today, I was out there filling in my daily log about Mojo Journal and how I was so grateful for what I have in my life and the miracles that we keep creating. If you don't record your miracles, you won't remember them sometimes because there's so many. So I always ask people, record your miracles. And they say, what miracle? That's why you have to record them. You know that everything in life is really your truth. What you're thinking today becomes tomorrow's reality, and you all know that. So put your cursor on the three little dots. Be sure that you record. And remember, again, I see Jerry and Des hand up, and we're going to end with our wonderful speakers with a big gratitude to both of you for the video. I think you really and truly allowed us to see the energy that Robert brought. And to that, I say, okay, Jerry and Des, you get the last word today. Thank you.
Barbara, I just wanted everyone to know that we will send an email through you giving the information on how to pre-register for the October launch of the Visioneers. And we'll do this by giving you a link to our latest bulletin, which contains a lot of other information. So that's coming. Barbara, you'll be our conduit to make that happen.
All right. And then Jerry, your words?
Okay. I would just like to say that in the Visioneering virtual exposition, Robert is a hero of humanity. And so is Irvin Laszlo on our platform. And so is Ben Ferenz and Douglas Roach and some other absolutely incredible people. And I would like to invite your stories to the wall of stories. So if you have a story to tell that reflects good work, every time you do that, you inspire others to do what you're saying. And the wall of stories goes past you as you watch our website, as you watch this information on the bulletin, with Robert playing the Ode to Joy behind this. It is incredible, and it is linked to the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals by color coding the bricks on the wall for each of the development goals that particular project is addressing. So if you have a story, we want to hear it. We're going to give you all the information you need. Please take some time to read about this. This is a bit about the future.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you so much. You know, I don't know if I have everybody's email, but I have your names. I don't have Robert Martin. If you don't, would you put your email into the chat, Robert, so I can be sure and send information to you? And if you don't think I have your email, stick it in the chat and I will record it. And I will get it today. But I think today was an incredible day to have Robert on the screen on Zoom, to have his energy. You see, now Robert was 20 years older than me and only this tall. Remember, I told you that story in chapter 2, but that didn't matter. It only mattered that I was with him. I had to be with him. That's all I can say. And I couldn't live my life if I wasn't with him. And so I just got rid of my company. I sold my company for $1 to all my employees. Each give me $1. You take whatever you want. It's yours. And they went off, and some of them are millionaires because they know what to do with what I didn't want to do anymore. And so you realize that you have change in your life. And I knew when Robert said to me, I love you, that he wasn't kidding. It wasn't like, I love you. Yeah. It was, I love you. And I had the chills that I got into my body because I knew if I said back, I love you, my life would change. And was I ready for the change from a White House and the Jaguar, an art collection, to a little tiny cabin in Costa Rica with mice on the floor and termites in the roof and thunder and lightning as a daily antidote for boredom. You're never bored in Costa Rica. First of all, you make sure you don't have a terciopelo in your pants, because then if they get you, that snake kills you instantly. My sister would say to me, how can you live there? I said, I'm protected by God. She would say, well, I'm not going to go there. I said, okay, you're not protected by God in Costa Rica. Don't worry about it. And I remember climbing the mountain at 60 and saying to Robert, am I supposed to be climbing this mountain at 60? Aren't I supposed to be having a birthday party? And he said, oh, no, we're going to climb the mountain now. So we climbed the mountain. And then he named the mountain after me. So if you ever go to Mount Resort, you're going to see Mount Barbara. And it's the biggest one there, because he knew I was taller than him. He got the little mountain and I got the big mountain. So you see, life is full of experiences. Just value every one of them. They're just amazing. And we would have people come from all over the world to our 350 hectares, which is quite a lot of land. We had rivers, we had mountains, we had streams, and we had mosquitoes. And I come from the United States, where we like sugar. Man, did they like me. I look like a pincushion sometimes. And I'd put all this, kaopectate on me or whatever the heck it was. And all of a sudden they would go away. And I would say, see, Robert, the miracle of this, whatever the heck I'm putting on my body. And so these are the experiences that I traded my white Jaguar, my white walls, and everything else for. And we didn't give up my house in Santa Barbara. You notice I always have art around me and plants. And in Costa Rica, one day and I already told this story before, but one day when I was ready to bring it all together, I realized I had a job. I could create Monet gardens in Costa Rica. It was a perfect climate. So from that depression, I worked in the yard, grew our own vegetables, and created flowers. We had orchids on everything. And all of a sudden, I became happier because I was doing something to improve the land. There are so many people on here I wish I could have talked to today. Dennis Wong has this incredible program every Monday morning. And if you want to put it in the chat and you want to listen to Dennis Wong and join him for Ukraine and getting the latest update, do it. And I see Richard Denton. Richard, do you want to say something? He was at the Houston Conference for Rotary. This is one of my heroes. Richard, say a few words.
Well, both you, Barbara, and Robert are great inspirations. I first read his book, All They Taught Me Was Happiness, and I was inspired years ago by that book of Robert's. And today, again, is another inspiration. Thank you.
Thank you. Helen, I see you holding up the book. Hold it. You've got an original. Most of all, They Taught Me Happiness. This is an original copy. Wow. How did you get that? You have to go on YouTube.
I ordered it online and it came 6 weeks later. It was owned by Liziter, KT Liziter. And then this book, as you know, I ordered online in 3 different places. It came 6 weeks later, and now I have 3 of them. And this one is engraved by both Robert and Robert Gillies and Douglas Gillies and Robert. So I've done well with my books.
Well, each of you bringing so much to this moment, this hour and a half, and I thank you. Again, I'm Barbara Gunn Mueller, lover of life and lover of all of you. And each of us has this power to be more than we ever thought possible. And I'll never forget Robert saying, dream what you want, because that's how it will happen. First, see it in your mind, and then it will happen. With that, I say thank you. August 7th, mark your calendar, and please join us for Irvin Laszlo. I'm amazed. I'm amazed at these fabulous people like Douglas Roach, who started us out. And Douglas Roach did chapter 1. And if you want to hear Douglas Roach, how he said, I can never be a Robert Mueller, but I certainly can do some of the things he suggested. And with that, I close. Go to peacepodcast.org. In the blog at the bottom, you'll hear Robert play his harmonica. Anytime you want to hear it, just go to the blog. It's the same recording that Jerry and Des did, and I added it to the blog on peacepodcast.org. 85 Peace Podcasts are now complete. And guess what? You can go to Spotify. I'm in love with Spotify. I don't have to look at me anymore. I can just listen to the wisdom of my guests on Spotify. If you don't know about Spotify and you're in your car and you're bored to death, go to Spotify and pick one of the 85 people. Dennis Wong is on there. Laurie Marshall's on there. Helen is on there. Tammy, I don't know if I have you yet, but I'm going to get you there. Each of you, Sandy Hinden is one of my podcasts. Go to Spotify and start listening. Get the courage that these people had to do what they knew was right. God bless you. Love you. And next August 7th, I'll see you on Zoom, if not sooner. Bye-bye.